Welcome, everybody, to 2026 in our Fisheries Thursday seminar series. I have the privilege of co-leading the seminar series with Jeff Muehlbauer up in Fairbanks. So we brought together a great group of speakers over the course of the semester that'll be speaking on a broad range of topics from both marine to freshwater and everywhere in between. And we're excited to have Ginny Eckert and Connie and Emily Reynolds kick off our seminar series with an overview on Alaska Sea Grant State and Knauss Fellowships. Please join me in welcoming them.
All right, it looks like you guys, here, I'll even see if this works. So I'll have multiple versions of me if you want to see me. Yeah, so thanks for letting us crash the fisheries seminar series. It's great to be able to meet with folks that might have interest. And if you personally don't have interest, but you have friends of interest, you can tell them about this cool stuff you learned in the seminar. It's great to also present this with Emily Reynolds, who is a current state fellow. In fact, she's doing a second year in a fellowship, which is possible. And then Connie will be joining us, and she's in Washington, D.C., logging in from there. And she's currently a Knauss Fellow. She's wrapping up her fellowship right now. So they'll be speaking from experience, and I'll just be speaking from an administrator point of view, I guess. All right. Let's see if this works. All right, so maybe just sort of super quick. I'm not going to go into a ton on Sea Grant, but Sea Grant is a NOAA University partnership, and there are 34 of us around the country. And there's, as you can see, because there's a lot of states on the East Coast, there's a lot of Sea Grant programs on the East Coast, but we all know that the best coast is the West Coast. And actually, we renamed our Pacific region as a super region because we've decided that, you know, the Mid-Atlantic is a region, but like, come on, like the Pacific region is like so much bigger than the Mid-Atlantic, for example. And so we are really a super region. And our West Coast includes basically all the contiguous states along the West Coast, and then Alaska, Hawaii, Guam, and then Puerto Rico actually fits in the Southeast. But so Sea Grant programs have a tripartite mission, so it includes research, education, and extension. And so the fellowship program fits very solidly into the education role. The Alaska Sea Grant State Fellowship is something that we started, 12 years ago. I was actually part of getting it going. And we did it because there were a lot of graduate students. So I came on board in a sort of part-time capacity with Sea Grant in 2013. And the director's like, hey, get more students to apply for the Knauss Fellowship. So I'd talk to grad students and I'd be like, hey, apply for the Knauss Fellowship. And then they're like, well, I don't want to go to Washington, D.C. And so I looked around and I saw that California Sea Grant had a state Sea Grant program where the students could stay in state. You could help build capacity in the state. So I was like, well, that's what we want. So we designed the program sort of modeled after the Knauss program. So you'll see there's some similarities, but it's also sort of, we borrowed liberally from California Sea Grant. And our program, there's a variety of state Sea Grant programs around the country. Not all states have state fellowship programs, but a lot of them do. It's become more popular, and it really does serve a huge need here in the state of Alaska. We see the need from two perspectives. So we see the grad students that need to get a launch into a career, and then we see employers that are looking for people and want to hire people, but maybe they have this very convoluted and elaborate hiring process, or maybe even a hiring freeze. And so we are able to basically help them to get a bright, new, amazing young person into their program and to get over some of those hurdles. So, I mean, I've had people come up to me at AMSS and say, I want one of them Sea Grant fellows. I hear they're amazing, and they truly are. And it's been a great program. When we first started, we had 2 fellows in the program. Because we're like, okay, well, we're gonna start this small, like California's big, they have 20 fellows, so two's a good number, right? Well, the demand has grown a ton, and so I think this year we have like on the order of 13 fellows, and so it's a lot. And as the federal government turns, we sort of have different hosts that come and go. But even with sort of the chaos that's happened, we've had a really good turnout this year. So it's been really exciting. And now there's this great network of alumni. That was one of the things I saw with the Knauss program that was huge, was this network that got created. And so many people are like, oh, like you were a Knauss fellow, and then you like start up a conversation because you have this common ground through the fellowship, and our state fellowship program now sort of has that. One of the things I'm very proud to say is Matt Robinson, who works in Senator Murkowski's office, was one of our first two. I mentioned there were two state fellows in the first year, and he was one of them. And so it's great to continue to work with him in a different capacity. But we have that, tight bond because he was one of our first fellows, and he was excited because he was a fellow. So it was great. So there's lots of advantages to this, and it's a really exciting program. I have a lot of enthusiasm for it. So let's see, I've said some of this already, modeled after Knauss. It's a 12-month paid fellowship, and we require the fellows to be based in Alaska during their fellowship. So if your organization is one of those awful ones, like the NOAA Alaska Fisheries Science Center that has a place in, what's that, Seattle? That makes no sense. You need to live in Alaska during your fellowship. We're building capacity in Alaska, and we believe strongly in that. We do help find homes. If your host is outside the state and you want to do work here, we help you to make that happen. This is geared towards soon to graduate or recently finished graduate students. I think we officially say like you must be within a year or two of graduating. So we're kind of looking for folks that are soon to graduate or finish. This is not, let me clarify, this is not a way to find funding for your PhD or master's work. That is not the intent of this. This is a full-time job that you're going to take on. Some people do take it on before they're officially finished. There's pros and cons to that. And maybe some of the folks that are speaking can address that. There's pros and cons. Some people are able to basically finish up and defend like in the early part of their time as a fellow. Some people do their fellowship and then come back like for a semester and then graduate. So all of those things are possible. The Knauss timing is one that, well, and as you'll see when we get to Knauss, the Knauss timing is kind of all over the place. But in the past, the Knauss fellows started in February, and that was a really weird time. So oftentimes we would have students that basically, kind of had one more semester to finish and wrap that up after they finished their Knauss. Through the state fellowship program, we've had a whole variety of different hosts, and there's some representatives here. It's a variety of different organizations. So there's state agencies, there's a lot of federal agencies, there's nonprofit organizations, and other sort of somewhat university-based organizations that are here. But we're really looking to get students out into the workforce. So this isn't it's not a traditional postdoc, right? That's not typically the path that we have for students. There are, if people are still sort of embedded in the university, they're usually doing something a little bit outside of like traditional academia. And one thing to clarify though, is that this is a fellowship position. And so this isn't that it's like, well, I want to go get a job at Fish and Game, and I noticed that Fish and Game has a host, is being a host this year, and so I want to go do that one thing, okay? We don't encourage that. In fact, the hosts and the fellows are currently both applying simultaneously, so we actually don't even know who the hosts are going to be this year. And we do sort of have, we require that the hosts and the fellows are both open to considering multiple applicants for their either position as a fellow or as a host. So the timeline, the call for fellows and hosts opened up in December, and the applications are due in just a few weeks. So if this is you, then time to get going on it. We then do reviews of applications. We typically do a short list for interviews. And I would say that these interviews are actually really good professional development opportunities. I know that sometimes I've actually even like sat down with people afterwards and been like, here's ways that you can be a better interviewee in your next interview. Because you don't get any training in that, right? Like go to grad school and nobody says, well, how do you do an interview? So the interviews themselves are actually really good experience. In March and April, then the hosts do interviews. And so after, and to maybe clarify, so after we do our interviews, depending on how many applications we have, sometimes we have to trim the applications at that point because in some years we've had so many applications. We then send a decent number of them to the host, and we try to align it so that there's sort of a host position for each of the fellow that's interviewing. You are not guaranteed placement until you actually place with a host, but the hosts do their set of interviews and matching as well. And this is also actually similar to how Knauss works. So the fellows rank their hosts that they interview with, and the hosts rank the fellows they interview with, and then we try to do this little magical matching, which surprisingly actually works out generally pretty darn well. And then placements are announced in May, and then we have fellows, and they generally start either August 1st or September 1st. We've sort of narrowed it down to 2 different start dates because it's used to be a little more flexible, and that's a little chaos to manage. So the award for the state fellowship is that it's a flat stipend, and it includes basically the $5,000 a month, is inclusive of the other things that you have to do when you are basically being paid a flat amount. So you're responsible for finding your own health care and taxes, and I certainly hope the ACA amendments get filed because we would not want our fellows to have to pay crazy amounts. It used to be pretty reasonable for us to say this, so hopefully that will happen. And I hear rumors that it's looking positive. There's also an additional amount of money for fellowship-related travel and any training. And then some hosts actually provide additional travel because the position just requires that the fellow travel for the work that they're going to do. All right, so some of this I've already said. So basically, you're eligible if you're close to completing your degree or if you earned a degree within 2 years. And of course, you need to be in good academic standing if you're in an academic degree. So the application is pretty straightforward. If you guys are in grad school, you're good at this stuff already. So you have to write a statement. It's a short one, 1,000 words. You have to submit a CV. You have to submit your transcripts. And then you need 2 letters of recommendation. And one should be from a faculty member, and the other can be from a person of your choosing. And then you're going to put all this into a program called EC Grant, which go online. You'll be able to figure out. The instructions are there. It's pretty straightforward. Ways to upload things. For the letters, you don't upload the letters. You just put the email in of the person that is going to submit the letter, and then the system will email them and say, hey, here's the link so that you can directly upload it. All right, now I'm going to turn it over to Emily, and she's going to tell you about her experience as a fellow.
Yeah, thanks, Jenny. Can everyone hear me? Or actually, just you say if you can hear me, Jenny.
You're great.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, I'm, like Jenny said, I'm a second year fellow. So I'm mostly going to be talking about my first year experience, and I mean, I'm active in my second year, but I got placed with the NOAA Fisheries, specifically their aquaculture program. So if you're unfamiliar, the picture in front of you is actually a farm in Alaska based in Homer. So there's a lot of travel in my fellowship, which I'll get into, and I'll also touch upon some of the stuff that Ginny mentioned. So kind of let's get into it. Next slide, please. So my fellowship work, my main job was to assist with suitability analysis and habitat mapping. within the aquaculture. And so we're talking about suitability for aquaculture. And with that came a lot of like outreach to tribes and a lot of technical writing, a lot of actually not so much writing myself, but also checking the writing. And I also got to have my own separate project on seaweed mapping. And I got to publish that data set. So understanding the QA/QC pipeline within NOAA fisheries and how that's done and how to write up my own metadata. So this was like a huge learning process and just continuing to add onto my CV. And it was a crazy first year. So that was my entire first year. And then so second year, right now we're coordinating workshops for the web mapping tool, which directly is related to that suitability analysis that we were doing previously. So it's been a great through line. And I also had several opportunities to work in the lab. So I work on the federal side in the aquaculture program, but there's also the Fisheries Science Center, which most of you are very familiar with in Juneau. And I got to help with their measuring and spawning. They're just kind of starting up a hatchery and it's going so well. And that's what those pictures on the right are. And, you know, I'm going to talk a little bit more about this, but, you know, getting into the lab and stuff like that was not the initial plan, but, you know, you network enough and you work with these people, you really get some great opportunities because I love getting out of the office. So it was a real highlight. Go ahead to the next slide. So this is what I'm really going to like dive into networking because again, like most of my work was, you know, from the get-go was supposed to just be the mapping stuff and assisting with that team and NCOS. And there's a lot of very structured, laid out goals, which is great. And great to learn that part of things. But I also got to go on scientific dives, and that wouldn't be possible without, you know, networking with the Science Center and through other NOAA fisheries partners. So I got to do some habitat provisioning projects, or it's just one project, but some dives doing that and a biofouling project out of Homer. And then what was actually more aligned with the work that I was doing was aquaculture site visits. So I got to go visit several different aquaculture sites, connecting with the industry partners, listening to what they need, and you know, also learning the logistics of aquaculture operations, which help really inform that web tool that we're developing, and also, you know, what data sets are useful, like what's actually like considered suitable you know, versus in kelp and oysters, and what the farmers are thinking about. So that was instrumental and a great way to also just get outside and apply, you know, the physical into the mapping world, which was really great experience doing that. Next slide. But the really fun part, so Ginny mentioned we get $5,000 stipend. I went all over the place. Conferences are a huge way to network. They're so fun. I do love presenting. So I got to go to the Mariculture Conference of Alaska. Sea Grant is great for hosting that. The year I went, they were in Sitka. And then I also went to Seagerculture in Ketchikan. The pictures that you see on the screen are from Ketchikan. We got to go to oyster site out there as well. Go ahead, next. And then I also got to go to New Orleans. Great food, highly recommend. Went to Aquaculture America, gave a talk there. So good, so good. Next slide. And then I also went to the conference on the biology of marine mammals. I got to present some of my previous work there, but I was representing Sea Grant and as a Sea Grant Fellow. Australia was amazing. I don't think I need to talk up Australia, but truthfully, I mean, none of it would have been possible, you know, if it wasn't for Sea Grant. And it was such an amazing opportunity and incredible, like international experience. And I met so many people doing different research. Such a great experience. Next. So some benefits I kind of like really touched upon all of them, but living in Alaska is fantastic. I've almost been in Alaska for a decade now, but it is truly an amazing place and a great experience. And for how big it is, networking is kind of easy because it's so intertwined, and it's just so great. Everyone's very friendly. And the thing that I also want to touch upon is finding out early about fellowship status. So Jenny went over the timeline, but especially if you're a graduate student right now, it is pretty critical to know that you have like a job opportunity lined up for right after you graduate. It is like a relief, I must say. So I started applying right like a month or so before I defended my thesis. And then I found out like a couple weeks after I defended that I got a match with a host. And so it's really just like it's such a great stepping stone, which I'll talk more about that, but it's really great in that sense where you can stop applying for jobs. It's pretty nice in that respect. And the diverse hosts. So when I first applied, there were so many different hosts. It was really hard to choose actually to whittle down. So that ranking system that Ginny was talking about, you rank five, and it's hard because they're all so interesting. I mean, there's a couple that like really don't seem that interesting, but it's just because it's such a wide variety of hosts. So it was great to actually struggle with picking a host, because that's a good struggle to have in my opinion. And then the numerous travel opportunities. So I mentioned only a few of the travel opportunities that I had. I have more coming up. I'm set to go to Las Vegas for another Aquaculture America conference, and then also conferences in Anchorage, Kodiak, and yeah, we'll see. The possibilities are endless. And then so the networking, that's like the really big one in my opinion. It's I didn't realize how much networking possibilities I would get just from being a fellow. In the actual NOAA space, you really talk with everyone, and sort of pick up the slack where you need to. And I must say, like, if you're willing, if you're in the fellowship and you're in a meeting and someone's mentioning, oh, well, we're doing this work and we're a little bit behind and we need someone, you can jump on that. And hosts are pretty flexible, or at least in my experience, they've been very flexible with allowing you to pursue those networking possibilities while still doing your other work that you wanted to do. And that was like such a great surprise and really fantastic. I can't say more about that. And then the big thing is, learning new skills to develop your early career goals. So what I'm really sort of meaning by that is that like stepping stone that I was talking about, it's, you're putting more on your CV essentially right out the gate of being graduated, or, a little bit later on, but it really, like, you can really sort of flourish in this position and sort of talk with your hosts about like your goals, and they really like work with you to mesh those goals. Like maybe you want more experience in R, well, oh, you can help with this project in R, and so on and so forth. But it's it's really a place to grow. And so this is my next slide. I'm not sure what happens next, but I would be willing to stay for questions. I don't know if we want to save that to the end. But yeah, any questions about my experience or application process, whatever, I'm here.
Okay, Emily, I think we're just going to keep going, and then so save questions to the end. That'll sort of work better in the format that we have here. And I do see that Connie is online as well. So, but yeah, just a reminder, the deadline's February 5th. This is the link to the website, has lots and lots of information there. And you can shoot an email to Molly. So Molly Kane is the Associate Director for Research and Fellowships at Alaska Sea Grant. And she's on leave, but she is working a little bit. So But if you don't hear from Molly, you're of course welcome to reach out to me, but she's sort of the master of this program. All right, so moving over to Knauss, and I'll run through this a little bit quickly as well and have Connie share her experience, because the experience part is the really cool part, right? So the Knauss Fellowship Program is across the whole country, and all Sea Grant programs around the country have Knauss Fellows. In fact, there's a cap. So each state is allowed to submit 6 applications. And we've never had 6 from Alaska. So here's where you're really lucky to be from Alaska, because if you're in California, there's a huge competition to be one of those 6, or New York or Florida, right? Those big states really struggle, but we have a lot of extra spots. So it's a little bit, it's not a cakewalk, and it is a bit more of it's a very competitive process, I will say. I've been on the panel of reviewing applications in the past, and it is, there's this first cut of making the state get moving and advancing from the state level to the national level, and then there's a national review panel. So the Knauss Fellowship has a goal to basically give students professional experience in DC, and so this is in the legislative and executive branch of the government, and to basically gain experience in ocean and coastal management, fisheries, and research. And as I mentioned, there's a great extensive network of alumni, and I'd say it's worth doing it just to be part of that network. So as I mentioned, you can be in the executive branch or in the legislative branch. The number of legislative positions is more limited, but there's a lot of different opportunities in the executive branch, and it includes a variety of different federal agencies. And I often see that we have fellows that are being mentored by alumni of the Knauss program. So that is quite common. And so that that network is kind of funny. In fact, some of our past Alaska Knauss Fellows have hosted Knauss Fellows from Alaska. So the network is quite tight. And yeah, the legislative branch is the branch that makes the laws. And so there's placements that could be in committees or in legislative offices. Connie will be able to speak directly to her experience because she's a legislative fellow. So she'll tell you more about it. And the timeline for the Knauss, so typically the Knauss applications will be open right now. And they would be due in February, typically. But the Knauss program is sort of undergoing a shift in timing, and they've shifted the timing of the current fellows. So the fellows that were supposed to start on February 1 are going to start on June 1, and they're shifting the timing a little bit, which I think in the end is going to be a really great thing, because that February start date just does not work with an academic calendar. But because of that, we're sort of in a little bit of a holding pattern trying to see how this is going to play out. So there are applications to state programs, TBD when that's going to happen. Then those applications basically get notified if they're going to advance to the basically, so we actually not even all necessarily get interviewed at many states. We typically tend to interview most all of our applications. And then we then nominate up to 6 people. And then there are states, so one of the things I will say, because we are a smaller state, there are states that don't have Sea Grant programs, for example. So if there was a grad student from Montana or Utah where there's no Sea Grant program, they could actually apply through our program, and the national office would direct them to apply through us because we're one of the smaller states people-wise. So some of our applicants do end up coming from other states. So there's a national level review, and then finalists are notified, and then fellows are placed. And so there's a placement week for executive fellows and a placement week for legislative fellows. So I'm guessing that this timeline is going to look something like there'll be applications that open sometime this spring. And that's a guess. I kept hoping, actually. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna wait to revise these slides to see if there's an announcement, but there's nothing yet. So stay tuned on this. If you're interested in Knauss Fellowship, maybe let me know, and I can make sure that you are informed when this happens. And of course, Sea Grant's very good at communicating, so we will be sure to get the word out when this opens. So the fellowship award, so basically you're placed in the DC area. The salary is $73,000, which is very nice. And also that $5,000 for travel and training opportunity funding. And then offices can add additional travel money too. So, and that really varies. And there's travel money to travel to placement week if that happens in person. So, over the years, how these things have run have varied a little bit, but I suspect that the levels will be at least this, and it's possible they would go up a little bit. Eligibility is fairly similar. This might change. One thing might change here. So it says any student, regardless of citizenship, and I suspect that might change. I suspect this is going to become open only to U.S. citizens, only because it's actually really hard right now to not be a U.S. citizen and to work in a federal agency. So I suspect that might change. But these are sort of the rules from the past. You need to be enrolled when you apply. And so that's something that we'll have to figure out, because if they're shifting the timing a little bit, and like maybe you apply now in May, I don't know, like or June. So that might shift a little bit. And then you need to be in a graduate program in an accredited institution. And then, of course, you want to work in this arena. This application runs through our program. It also goes through EC Grant, so it's quite similar to how you apply for the state fellowship. So this is EC Grant. This is what it looks like. So the instructions are on our website. The application materials are a little bit more complicated than the state fellowship, but if you prepare a state fellowship application, you're well on your way. But the education and career development essays are a little bit more specific now for the Knauss program, whereas we've kept this. The state fellowship one is actually how Knauss used to be some time ago. And now the Knauss one is a little bit more specific, but it actually think helps applicants because there's prompts. And it's like, here, tell us about this. Tell us about, where you want to go. And so it's more specific, which I think gives you more chance to explain your interests and your background and to be more competitive. All of the Knauss applicants that get submitted from a state program are accompanied by a letter from the director of the program. And that is basically hopefully going to help your chances. So the director is going to sort of point out things that are unique about your application that hopefully will help support your application. So we do have information on our website. This is the stuff from last year because it hasn't been updated. But I suspect that it will be updated as soon as we hear information. So application tips. It's really helpful to talk to alumni. And we have quite a network of alumni here in Alaska. And if you go to our website, there are some suggestions. But if you're interested, reach out to me. I can help put you in touch with alumni. Definitely proofread your application, prep your letter writers. These are generally good things. And then start early. It does take some time. So proofread is always good, always good. All right, Connie, over to you to talk about your experience.
Great. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. I'm Connie. I am a current Sea Grant Knauss Fellow, as Ginny had mentioned. I've been a fellow since last January when I moved to DC. And so I'm excited to share my experience in the office of Senator Sullivan's office. I guess a little bit about me to backspace. Still a master's student at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. I'm getting my master's in fisheries at the university. I'm advised by Andy Seitz, and so this will be helpful context for my next slide. But I'm studying snow crab movements and distributions in the Eastern Bering Sea. This photo was actually taken yesterday. This is me and my Ledge Fellow cohort in front of the Capitol. I actually had my Knauss graduation today, so it's been a kind of a big day of reflection for me on kind of how this year has gone. So let's jump into it. Next slide. So, a lot of people ask why Knauss, and Ginny kind of gave you a very good background on kind of the workload that goes into putting in an application. It's a pretty competitive and prestigious fellowship. There's a ton of fellows that apply and don't get into the fellowship, and the ones that do, are very proud, especially with the extensive network that comes with Knauss. And so I don't take that lightly. Um, for me, I grew up in a small community in St. Paul Island, Alaska. If you're not familiar, that's located in the central Bering Sea. And I grew up in a commercial fishing family. And so that's really where I kind of want to start with like my why for this program. Um, when I was getting my Bachelor of Science in biology, I honestly didn't know what I wanted to do for a career. And at the time, my community was kind of struggling with a halibut bycatch issue. And coming from a commercial fishing family, my family was actually pretty involved in attending a lot of fishery management council meetings, the International Pacific Halibut Commission meetings, to try and kind of advocate for basically like equitable like bycatch limits for the directed fishery. So basically, like I've had this very like personal and community perspective on conservation of resources, the importance of economics for supporting communities and the state. And then I guess kind of having that, it really kind of drove me to pursue like a further um, advanced degree. And so that's kind of what drove me to get my master's. So I'm also a DeMumpta fellow in the DeMumpta program. Um, and so I've had a really unique experience. So that's really like kind of my why for wanting to do Knauss. I was doing some field research for my master's on a snow crab boat, and one of my field trips, I was actually on the Eastern Bering Sea Trawl Survey, and one of the NOAA fish staffers, she was actually Knauss Fellow, mentioned the program and really convinced me that this transformative program would really give me a better understanding of kind of connecting community perspective with science, with legislation. And so I I don't know, I'm really happy that I did it, and I was really happy because it's scary to move from Alaska all the way to DC. I've never lived out of Alaska before. And I don't know, looking at these pictures, just looking back, it's been a really eye-opening experience. So I'll leave it there for my why, and we can move on to my experience. So as Ginny said, I was placed in office of Senator Sullivan's office. I won't go into details, but the placement process is hectic. I think I spent 3 out of 5 days for orientation running around the hill trying to interview with all these different offices to figure out which office is going to be the best fit for me. And it's honestly really hard. Each office that does put in for a Knauss Fellow is amazing. They're all focusing on such interesting things surrounding like marine and coastal policy. Um, Naturally, like I'm not surprised I was placed in an Alaska office. And so I've had a tremendous amount of opportunity to work on things that mean a lot to me and a lot to the state. And I think carrying like my kind of my background from coming from a small community to kind of enhance, my perspective for the senator on advocating for policy that might impact the state has been really, really amazing. So just to give an idea of like my day to day, the day to day is pretty crazy. No day is the same, but I've, I guess I can kind of like go over my bullet points since I prepared them. I've had the opportunity to craft original bill text. You'll see that is a bill that I got to introduce probably 4 months into my fellowship. It was very exciting. You get a lot of opportunity to network. Networking is huge amongst this fellowship. You have to oftentimes talk to offices that you're like, oh, I got to talk to an office in Maine or an office in Florida and Hawaii. And so you're building like all of these different connections on like why, your bill should align and garner support from another state to to kind of basically, I don't want to say fix, I would say like enhance, current legislation. And so um, it's fun to draft original bill text. You do actually use your scientific background. You're often reading a lot of scientific articles. You're, thinking about like who is an expert in like this field that you could reach out to. And if you don't know, you have like the Congressional Resource Services who can like give you a kind of like a neutral briefing. They can't really give you recommendations. And yeah, you basically like get to bounce ideas off of like stakeholders in the state for, what their needs are. And also something that's been really cool about this experience. So the senator is a ranking member in the subcommittee on, oh my gosh, it's changed, the Fisheries, Maritime, and he sits on the one of the subcommittees for commerce. I apologize. It's a really long title. But anyways, I've had the opportunity to staff him in committee meetings, and preparing him for these meetings are a lot of fun. You also get to deep dive on various topics on like other bills and legislation, that other offices have kind of proposed to, give a recommendation on like yay or nay or not. I've met with a lot of constituents from around the state and even other states. Again, it's a lot of bipartisan work to try and come together and figure out a way to work together. And this year has been interesting because, we often see kind of a partisan divide, but as a Knauss Fellow, to be a Ledge Fellow, they ask you to have a nonpartisan sort of view. So I try and keep that in mind throughout my fellowship. Very exciting in the top right corner there, my city mayor actually came to visit on the Hill. And so it was really cool and I was very proud to, meet with him and have him meet with the senator to kind of talk about updates in my community and how the senator can kind of help. Okay, next slide. So my Knos experience has been incredible. I was, again, very scared to move to DC. I really thought I was going to hate it, to be honest. I had really considered the State Sea Grant Fellowship. But the Knaus cohort and the extension of alumni is incredible. You get to do so many things. You get to experience some crazy weather and seasons, but also like just building a lot of really deep connections with people who want the same things as you in science and in and bettering like your social life truly and our way of life, I guess, in living. But like Ginny said, you do get a stipend. And so I had the chance I was kind of stingy with my professional development with trying to save as much of it as I could to go home. So I got to go back to Kodiak and attend Comfish where the senator gave remarks. Me and my mentor got to go tour the NOAA Shellfish Lab, which was a lot of fun. I did force him to hold that crab, even though he really didn't want to. Um, I decided to try new things. I never played softball a day in my life and decided to join our Senate softball team. That was a lot of fun. I went on a staff delegation to Hawaii to learn about some aquaculture efforts in Oahu and Kona, which was really cool to see some offshore finfish sites. I also got to visit the Kasutsna Bay Nair, which was really incredible. I honestly wish I featured a photo of that because they are doing incredible work. And I really appreciated how excited they are to have congressional staff go visit these offices to see all of the good work that they're doing. They can't be stressed enough on how impactful it is for the state and for monitoring. Something that I've been trying to do as a staffer in the senator's office is to really emphasize and highlight all of the good work that's going around the state because it's really expensive for, him to have to, well, not him, but it's really challenging for all of the good work in the state to be conveyed to a senator who's very busy. And so I try and really like emphasize all of that good work. Ginny had talked about this a little bit. The balancing of kind of completing your master's work while doing a Knauss fellowship. And so I chose and I worked with my committee to try and still maintain progress on my thesis. I got some work done on it, but because of how incredibly busy, at least for the legislative cohort side, you do end up spending a lot of time working on the Hill. So like for example, like a typical day is 9 to 6 when we're in session. But oftentimes like kind of you don't have to, it kind of depends on like your mentor, but oftentimes you do have to kind of do a last minute memo at the end of the day or help with a last minute vote rec. So oftentimes, you're working kind of late hours, which is really fun. It's fun to, feel like you're helping support and make change, and it's a team. You build a lot of camaraderie amongst the staff in your offices because they're such close knit um, and small, like employee sized offices. I did get to experience like my first votorama, well, two votораmas, and then a government shutdown. Something I did want to highlight that I thought was really cool was I implemented Fun Fish Fact Fridays in my office. There was only two people in the office who kind of focus on like the fishery side of the senator's portfolio. And so it was really fun to kind of spend every Friday highlighting unique fishing species in the state. A lot of people in my office don't normally like geek out about like cod and herring, and of course like they were excited about like salmon and wanted recipes. And so I don't know, I think trying to do things that kind of make you stand out and go the extra mile in a legislative office, because it is stressful, really really helps kind of boost morale during challenging work periods. Okay, next slide. Thanks, Ginny.
All right. Thanks, Connie. That was great. It's been great interacting with Connie, um, and visiting her in DC. And I will say that she's continuing. So the office she's in offered her a continuing position, and so she's going to be staying in Sullivan's office. So I look forward to seeing you when I'm there in March. All right, so we have time now for questions about either of these fellowships. And I might stop sharing and then highlight Emily and Connie. And if you have a question, maybe we'll do remote people first. That's what we often do. So if you're joining online and you have a question, just feel free to unmute and jump on and ask your question. I can try to monitor the chat. I can try. Any questions from people online?
You've got one at Fairbanks here.
Okay, we'll go to Fairbanks.
Hi, I'm curious with the Knauss Fellowship, you talked about both I believe it was the legislative and executive cohorts, sort of when that split kind of happens, if it's during the application process or the matching. Yeah.
So this might be subject to change in the future, but traditionally, when you apply, you indicate, well, it's actually changed a little bit over time, but typically you indicate your interest, and you could say, I'm interested in one, I'm interested in both, and or like I have, I'm pretty open to any opportunities. It might change, and so I'd say like stay tuned on that. And I think Connie, you might reflect on your application experience, which was a few years ago, but she might reflect on her choice and when she elected it.
Yeah, so the timing of the Knauss application is pretty lengthy. Like I put in an application in February, and then I wasn't notified that I was gonna get advanced to an interview, I think until like April, end of April. And then once that interview happens, I think I didn't find out that I was actually going to be a finalist until like June. So I think in that June month was when, the National Sea Grant Office will be like, hey, congratulations, you get to like advance to becoming a finalist before placement happens. And then that's when they kind of like send you a survey and they'll ask you like a series of questions that, why you might be interested in exec versus ledge. And then they also ask you again, because if you're going to work in a ledge office, they want you to be nonpartisan. So they'll ask you like a series of questions to make sure that you can kind of conduct that work without, having to kind of be one or the other. So that was kind of the process that I had. And then I think, I don't know, I want to say in August, September-ish is when we find out whether or not you actually get split between exec versus ledge. It's like right before the interview process because traditionally before all these upcoming changes, the exec fellows would actually interview and kind of get placed in their office much sooner than ledge fellows. They usually like interview with exec offices in like October. And then I didn't interview with any offices until I moved in January. So it's kind of different.
Yeah, so stay tuned on how the process will happen in the future. The one thing I will say is that, our Alaska congressional representatives have all had Knauss Fellows, and they always really want people from Alaska. So I think, they're, once again, the numbers game is in your favor. If you are interested in ledge is also sort of considered to be a little bit more competitive. Like you have to first you have to first like pass the state level, the national level, and then there are a limited number of legislative seats slots for the fellows. So it's definitely a feather in your cap to become a ledge fellow. The other thing that maybe I'll reflect on is I would say like because the ledge fellows are on the Hill and the exec fellows are kind of distributed all over, the ledge fellows end up being kind of this tight-knit group, which Connie kind of alluded to, but I think there's and not just the exec fellows also have tight-knit groups as well, but I've been really impressed with how well connected the ledge fellows are. All right. Any other questions online or from Fairbanks? All right.
Hi.
Any questions? Oh, go ahead.
Sorry.
You're good. Go ahead.
Couple, if that's okay. The first, so with the Knauss Fellowship, you do for sure have to move to Washington, but with the Sea Grant Fellowship, you might be able to stay where you're currently located, or do kind of both require you relocating?
So for Knauss, you absolutely have to go to DC, and you'd be based somewhere in the DC region. For the state fellowship, there are hosts that are kind of all spread all around the state. And so you are required to be in Alaska, but sort of where you are relative to where your host is can vary. So we do have, some fellows that, and it kind of depends on the nature of the work that they're doing. So there is some flexibility. There are some positions, for example, that they're just gonna, they'll be like, we want you to be in Kodiak, or we want you to be in Fairbanks or Juneau or Anchorage. Those are, Fairbanks, Juneau, Anchorage, probably the three most common places to be based. But there is some flexibility on that. And it varies by the host. So there's not really a single answer on that. And the host descriptions, so the way it sort of works, you apply for the fellowship. If you make it to the interviewing with the host stage, then you'll be sent the list of host opportunities, and those will specify where they're based. Because we don't want to have anybody apply to interview with a host that they're like, oh, well, I'm tied to this place. So we do make that clear in that process. Did you have any other questions, Gabrielle?
I did, yes, and thank you for the help with that very much. The last one is I had cut off earlier in Emily's presentation, and I had heard something about having a job lined up. So is it that you want a job position in addition to the fellowship, or it was something? I'm sorry, I got lost at that part. I just remember it could have a job lined up while applying or something.
Yeah, not really like lined up while applying, but after the process, like I must say that the process for applying to the state fellowship is relatively easy, but mostly it's very quick. So in my experience, I was applying as I was still in graduate school and about to defend. And then I like got placed with a host like a month or so after I defended. So I knew that I had that job. I think of this fellowship as a job because it is. I had that job lined up, right? You know, I didn't have to like search for jobs or continue to search for jobs because I knew pretty quickly. Like it only took a couple months. It was a very fast process, and then I had that. I didn't have to worry about it anymore because I did a summer semester after I defended. So it was a great transition, and it's also quite flexible with the starting date. Most hosts are, at least I should say. So it with that, like that's sort of what I meant. And you probably maybe lost that by getting disconnected.
Yeah. And then, so I would say, like, if you're on the job track, the fellowship is a 12-month commitment. And so, if you're applying for jobs and this is one of the things you're interested in, great. But I would say, like, if you accept a fellowship position, you're often taking a spot that somebody else isn't able to take. And so we really are asking, like, when you take that you commit for the full 12 months of the fellowship. That is pretty important. And then, we do see that there's really great job placement of fellows. Although let me caveat that with, we're in a little bit different world than we were before. I think the fellowship opportunity is going to maybe help folks weather this little storm that we're in, and maybe will hopefully help in the long run. The currently the agencies are being funded at pretty good levels. And so, there's a lot of gaps in programs. And I think that the fellowships are going to be able to help some of these agencies fill some of those gaps.
Perfect.
All right.
Thank you both so much.
All right. We have some questions here in Juneau. Curry.
Yeah, thanks, Connie, for sharing your experience with the Knauss Fellowship. And I guess this is a question for both you and Ginny, given that this fellowship is being done, during a break from graduate studies. What are your recommendations on where in the graduate process, and I'm sure that looks different for a master's versus a PhD, that one should think about applying? Is it sort of partway through, close to the end?
I think close to the end is really good. I mean, and this is something that will be interesting to see with the timing shifting. You are required to be enrolled when you apply currently. And so because of that, and because the timing has been, on the February start, it's quite common that there are folks that are doing kind of what Connie's doing, and that she's basically going to come back and needs to finish up her degree, so it's not done yet. I as an advisor of graduate students, I think it's always good if you finish because you always think you're going to, but maybe you won't. So that's my like advisor suggestion. But yeah, the timing there's not a single answer really of how you do it. And I would say that there are Knauss fellows that are kind of at many different levels, but I think the being at the end is a best practice. So I don't know if you have thoughts, Connie, or you've talked to some of your fellow Knauss fellows about this.
Yeah, I will say for me, like I am in the writing process of my graduate thesis, and I thought I was going to be like wrapping things up by like now, and my plans got derailed. I will say the majority of like PhD and graduate students that were finishing typically defended within like the first 3 months of our fellowship program. And that was also really challenging for them because the first 3 months I think were the hardest for at least from a ledge fellow perspective. I can't speak for exec fellows who are in those offices. I will say, like, my office, for example, was really, really great about giving me like half a day off on Fridays to go and like write. Also, giving it's kind of situational per office, right? Like, if they know you're almost done, they're super happy to like support you and be like, yeah, please take every Friday off or take like a day and a half off during the week, especially if it's a recess week to go finish, especially if you're so close. And again, several offices are very aware of how hectic their office workload can be, but are very understanding, especially if you're close to finishing and they want to see you finish. They're very proud to have a Knauss fellow in their office. So they'll do anything they can to support you.
Mhm.
Thank you, Connie.
Other questions in Juno? All right. I think we're pretty much out of time. So if you have questions, feel free to reach out to me or Molly Kane. And of course, you're welcome to reach out to Emily or Connie if you want to get more of their experience. If you want to connect with other alumni, let me know. There's a great network now around the state, both for past state fellows and past Knauss fellows. So, well, thanks everybody for the opportunity to share this stuff with you. I think it's a great program, and yeah, just thrilled that we had the chance to chat today. Thank you.